Well, guys, over the last several weeks, you've got to hear from Jordan and Jeremy in part 1 and part 2 of this series, and they've done such a remarkable job. And if you were here over the last couple of weeks, you heard the fact that Jordan and Jeremy, they were actually college roommates, and as college roommates in their apartment, they played a lot of what they said was Smash Brothers. And so they loved playing the game. They were fantastic at it. Apparently, Jordan was, I think, Samus, and Jeremy was Marth. Those were the characters they picked. And apparently, like their sophomore year in college, they beat everybody at Smash Brothers. Like they were the kings of it. Now, as they were talking about Smash Brothers and their characters and the whole thing, I just got to be honest with you guys. Like, I just didn't relate. You know, I was hearing it and I was like, oh, okay. And the reason I didn't relate, it was not because I'm against games and it's like, oh, that's for kids and, you know, all this kind of stuff. The reason for me I couldn't connect with them is because when I think of games, when I think of the best video games of all time, I think of the original Nintendo right there. Oh, yeah, that's right. So perhaps you can relate with that. And back in the 80s, I remember when I got the original Nintendo, it was awesome. It was euphoric, you know, the Christmas that I got that. And some of my favorite games that I love to play, perhaps you can relate, was track and field. You guys remember that? Man, I loved it, and throwing the javelin. And then I would get my arm all like tense over the A button and be like as fast as I could, you know, in the 100-meter dash. It was so much fun. Spent hours playing that game. And then, of course, Duck Hunt. You guys remember that? Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a classic. And the clay pigeons, they would get faster and faster. Then the bonus clay pigeon would come out, and you'd shoot that and be like, yes, this is awesome. But perhaps my favorite one of all time, by no surprise, I've shared this before, is Mike Tyson Punch-Out right there. Man, I loved it, you know, and you know, it'd be like King Hippo and Bald Bull and Glass Joe. And I actually fought Mike Tyson on this game a couple times. And every time I fought him, I never won, but every time I fought him, my hands would start sweating. I'd get the mustache sweat, you know, as a little middle schooler. And then I'd be, you know, all of a sudden I'd get all, and one hit, one punch, and that's all it took. And so he was amazing, but it was fun, right? But I spent hours and hours and hours as my all-time favorite game. But I think the most classic game of the original Nintendo is Super Mario Brothers, right there. And that one, you're clapping. That is impressive. Yeah. So, I mean, Super Mario Brothers, it's a classic. And in week 1, Jordan played the soundtrack to Smash Brothers, but the soundtrack to Super Mario Brothers, you guys remember it? Sounds something like this. Over and over and over. Now, here's the thing. Today, when I heard that, I'm like, you know, it's cool, but I now understand why my parents were driven so mad, because hearing that for hours and hours and hours, that is ridiculous. I had no idea. You know, today I listened to it and I'm like, that's crazy. Anyways, the whole point is, you know, Super Mario Brothers, the characters in that whole, you know, video game or Mario, player 1 was always Mario, and then player 2 was always Luigi. Remember that? And so, you know, for me, that's what I can relate to. For me, that's awesome. And so regardless if you're here today or if you're watching or listening online and you can relate with Jordan and Jeremy and Smash Brothers and Marth and, you know, Samus, or you relate with me and the original Nintendo and Super Mario Brothers and Mario and Luigi, regardless of where you're at with that, the reason why we're talking about video games and this whole thing is because today we're in part 3 of this series all about character. And guys, character, what we said throughout the series, character is that secret ingredient that leads to the most meaningful and purposeful things in your life. It's a thing regardless if you're a follower of Jesus or not. I mean, it's one of the greatest gifts you could give yourself. I mean, character is what's behind, you know, flourishing relationships. Character is behind a marriage that, you know, experiences so much intimacy and connection. Character is behind how you discover the heart of your son or the heart of your daughter and build that bridge of trust. Character is behind a career that is fantastic. Character is behind, you know, how you gain and sustain wealth in the most honest of ways with your wealth, like you're proud of it, not because you gained it in a dishonest way. I mean, character is even behind your relationship with God, to flourish and to have this relationship with God that you're like, man, I feel so close to him. And in fact, I love what Jesus says in Matthew 5. Look at this. He said, blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Now, the word blessed is synonymous with happy. Happy and character, happiness and character are so connected. And then Jesus says, the pure in heart, they see God. In other words, I talk about this all the time here at Northpoint. Like, there's an adventure in Christianity. Like, this idea that it's boring or like, oh, I got to go to church again. No, the adventure that I talk about, that thing to go, man, it's so intimate. There's so much passion I have around following Jesus. That's so intimately connected with character. And character is what allows you to have a legacy that you're proud of. That one day, someday, you look back on your life and you're like, man, I love my life. I love the things that I did. I love the things that I stood. Man, my life and my legacy, I'm incredibly proud of. Why? Because you maintained, you fought for, you prioritized your character. And that's what we're talking about. And in week 1, Jordan did a great job. He defined what character is. That's really important to give us a foundation. Jordan said when it comes to character, character is the resolve to do what is right according to what God says, regardless of the cost. And I love this. It's the resolve, that grit, that tenacity, that will to put the stake in the ground and go, man, I will not compromise on this. And I will not compromise. I have resolved to do what is right. Not right according to how you define right, not right according to how I define right, because if it's up to you and to I to define right, well, that's super subjective. That's really confusing. And then what's the point of character if it's left up to you and to me to define it? It's got to be something beyond us, something transcendent, something objective, something that is for you and loves you, someone who is willing to give his one and only son to demonstrate how much he's for you and loves you. It's character defined by what God says, regardless of the cost. In other words, when it comes to character, you have to know it comes at a cost. Character is not cheap. It can cost you being misunderstood. It can cost you missing out on some financial gain. It can cost you people saying, hey, you're weird or you're archaic or, man, I can't believe you still hold on to those kind of values. It can come at a cost, but it's the secret thing. It's the sauce behind everything that is so meaningful and purposeful that we long for in life. Jordan did a great job in week 1. And then week 2, Jeremy talked about the obstacle to our character, the thing that gets in the way, and he talked about pride. And he talked about the antidote to pride is humility. And at the end of his time, he just said, hey, anytime you feel pride swelling up inside of you, he gave us a statement to say, hey, pride is not my guide. Just say out loud, say to yourself, man, pride is not my guide. And then at the end of the time, he gave us a question that requires an enormous amount of humility to ask, but it's incredibly rewarding. And the question he said, challenged all of us with, is what's it like on the other side of me? To be courageous enough, bold enough, humble enough, to ask the person that you trust, to ask a person who can give you that loving truth and reflect to you and say, hey, what's it like on the other side of me? Is there anything that I'm doing to create a gap with trust with you? Is there anything I'm doing that you feel like on the other side of me, devalued, not heard, not seen? Is there anything you would do differently if you were me? Boy, I'm telling you, that's a question that requires an enormous amount of humility, but it's one of the greatest gifts you could give yourself because now you have clarity. Now you have self-awareness, which leads to freedom, which leads to character. It's one of the greatest things you could do. So in week 1, week 2, that's what Jordan and Jeremy talked about. If you weren't here, I want to encourage you to go back, listen to what they said so far in this series. Now today, I simply just want to continue the conversation. And today, I want to go back to Super Mario Brothers, and I want to talk about these 3 guys. I want to talk about Koopa Troopa, Goomba, and the Piranha Plant. And if you guys are familiar with these fellas or characters, these were the enemies of Mario and Luigi in the game Super Mario Brothers. These were the ones who were trying to keep them from finishing the level. These were the enemies or the things, the obstacles, the stumbling blocks that were trying to minimize them. When Mario would eat the mushroom, get big, and then Koopa Troopa, he'd bump into that. It would minimize him. And so as I thought about this, I thought, you know what? In your life and in my life, when it comes to character, there's very similar things of like the Goombas or the Piranha Plants. And these things are stumbling blocks that we have to realize, again, regardless if you're a follower of Jesus or not, that every single day of your life, stumbling blocks will come your way that will test your character or will compromise your character. And it's true for all of us. I mean, we're going to have traumatic events that are going to come our way. Difficulties are going to come our way. Financial hardship or financial decisions. Temptations, moral temptations are going to come our way. Betrayal's going to come our way. Brokenness, lies are going to come our way. We're going to find out so many things. The longer you live, it's just bombardment of stumbling blocks against your character. And guys, again, this is for all of us, regardless if you're a follower of Jesus or not, including myself. I mean, as I was thinking about this, I was thinking about something I've shared with you guys multiple times, is that 10 plus years ago, my mom passed away from cancer. And I remember it was such a traumatic event for me. I watched her when she would pray. And when she would pray, she would ask God, please take away this cancer. God, if there's anything you can do to spare my life, I'm begging you to do that. And then I would watch her pray. I would open my eyes as she would pray, and I'd just watch her because I loved watching my mom. And she would ask God, if you're not going to take away the cancer, please do not let me die in these very specific ways. Don't let me suffer in these ways. Over the next 15 months, I watched my mom not only die, but I watched my mom suffer in the exact ways she begged God not to suffer. And it tested my character. I'm like, God, really? God, I thought you loved my mom. She was so incredibly faithful. That's a test to compromise. That's a stumbling block. I think in my life, how many times I've heard that, someone gossip. Someone gossip about me. Someone gossip about my family. Someone gossip about our church. And, when I hear that, part of me is like, that's just not true at all. Or the other part of me is like, there's so much more context to what's being gossiped about. And I'm just telling you, I'm a human being. When people gossip about me or my family, man, I feel it. It hurts. And when I'm hurt, guess what I want to do? I want to say something hurtful back. I want to do something hurtful back outside of God's design. I'm telling you, when gossip happens, it's a test to my character. I'll get really honest with you. When I played professional golf and traveled, went to all these hotel rooms, when I worked at Dell and traveled, went to hotels, or even, here as a lead pastor at Northpoint traveling, or when Jill and the boys aren't home, I'll just be honest. There are things that go through my mind that are genuine temptations. And that is a stumbling block to my character, temptations. And my point is this, for every single one of us, we're going to face this. And this is exactly what Jesus forewarned us. Jesus prepared us. Jesus said, hey, I love what he says in Luke 17. He said, it is impossible for stumbling blocks not to come. In other words, Jesus, who's for you, who loves you, says, guys, you need to know, like in this life, there will be stumbling blocks that come over and over and over in your life. Now, I love what Jesus says here because if you look at the original language, which is Greek, this was originally written in the Greek. In the Greek, the literal translation is like a Yoda statement. This is like Jesus in his Yoda moment. And literally, if you were to read it in the original language, here's what Jesus is saying. He's saying, impossible it is. Impossible it is. In other words, what Jesus is saying to you and to me, because he loves you and he's for you and he wants you to have life and life to the full, that's the invitation of Jesus. He's saying to you and to me, he's saying impossible it is for ideas not to come your way that will cause your character to stumble. You need to know this, that every day of your life, either via social media, that friend, maybe that book, that podcast, that biology or English professor, whoever it may be, that there's ideas that are going to come your way. And remember the definition of character, the resolve to do what is right according to what God says, regardless of the cost. Every day of your life, there's going to be an idea that's going to cause you to question, that's going to cause perhaps to compromise your character. And before long, you'll say things like this. Is it really that big of a deal? I mean, did God really say that? Is that what he really meant? I mean, is that really a sin? I mean, isn't God's grace big enough to forgive me anyways? I mean, isn't he going to forgive me? I mean, doesn't God want me to be happy? And before long, the justifications open the door to compromise your character. Jesus forewarned us of this. Not only that, but Jesus would say this. He would say, impossible it is for difficult times not to come your way that will cause your character to stumble. One of the things I love about Jesus, he gave us clarity. And Jesus says, in this world, you will face trouble, which maybe this is a clarifying point for you. See, oftentimes we think, hey, I'm just going to trust in Jesus and my life is going to be great. Like heaven on earth. Jesus never said that. Jesus never taught that. He actually taught the opposite. He said, your home is the home to come in the life to come. That is heaven. It's not here. This world is broken. And he forewarned us because he loved us. And he said, listen, in this world, you will face trouble. And the longer you live, regardless if you follow Jesus or not, you're like, yep, that's absolutely true. And when difficulties, traumatic events, we see evil in this world, brokenness in this world, we look up oftentimes and go, God, I thought you loved us. I thought you're for us. It's a stumbling block to our character. Or we could say this. We could say, Jesus would say, impossible it is for people not to come. That will cause your character to stumble. You know, something I teach my boys, a principle I teach my boys, or, principle we teach here in Transit and Inside Out, which is middle school, high school. Principle that applies to all of us as adults is your friends will determine the direction and quality of your life. That your friends, they will determine the direction and quality of your life. It's a principle. You either break your character against it or you live your life according to it. And guys, I'm just telling you, in my line of work as a pastor, I can't tell you how many people I've sat down with. And when I sit down with people, oftentimes it's not good. There's something wrong. And as they share their stories, inevitably as they unpack the narrative, I hear this. Well, then I met him, or then my son met her, or then my wife met him, or then my husband met her. And then they unpack the story. You love what King Solomon, one of the most famous kings of Israel, said. He said, he who walks with the wise will grow wise, but a companion of fools will suffer harm. It's a principle. My point, because we could go on and on, is Jesus says this to you and to me. It is impossible for the stumbling blocks not to come your way every single day of your life and undermine the very thing that will impact your legacy, that will impact your relationships, that will impact your joy and happiness in your life, which is character. So the question becomes, okay, if we're just talking, what do we do with that? Well, what is the key to maintain and sustain our character? If stumbling blocks are going to come for the rest of my life, every day of my life, they're going to come my way, what can we do to move forward? Well, the good news is, as I mentioned earlier, Solomon, who lived 3,000 years ago, Solomon, who's arguably one of the wisest men who ever lived, Solomon, who's arguably the wealthiest individual in human history, Solomon, he actually gives us the key in the letter of Ecclesiastes. And perhaps you've heard this before. Here's the key. He says this, 2 are better than 1 because they have a good return for their labor. And my question for you, and I really want you to think about this, is do you believe this? Do you truly believe this and value this in your personal life, that 2 are better than 1? This is exactly what God says. In the very beginning, God said this, it is not good for man to be alone. In other words, God who's for you, who loves you, who designed you, knits you together in your mother's womb, looks at you and me and says, man, I designed you to be intentionally connected. It is not good for you to think that you can figure this out all on your own. In fact, when you hear things like this, sometimes that comes to our mind. We go, well, that's kind of what I expected the preacher to say. Buck, that's kind of what I expected you to say. That's kind of religious talk. But is there any empirical data? Anything to substantiate that that's actually true? And guys, there's so much research. In fact, I love what Dr. Henry Cloud, who's a psychologist or psychiatrist, New York Times bestselling author. Here's what he says based on the research. Virtually every emotional and psychological problem, from addictions to depression, has alienation or emotional isolation at its core or close to it. Recovery from these problems involves helping people get more connected to each other at a deeper and healthier levels than they are. That 2 truly are better than 1. Now, guys, not only is this what God says, this is not only what the empirical data says, but this is experientially true. I've experienced this in my life. And this may be hard for you guys to believe, but, as I think about myself and I've discovered more about who I am, something that's true of me is I am a introvert through and through. And you may go, well, how in the world do you do what you do? And like, don't you love being around people? Of course I do. But after today, I got to go home and take a nap, guaranteed. I mean, I'll be exhausted. I'll have zero energy, which is really hard on Sundays because, my boys are off during the weekends and I'm in my chair, like, passing out. And they're like, Dad, come on, let's go work on the car. Let's go, And I feel that. So I fight my naps. But man, I am so de-energized the more people that I'm around. And I love being around people, but I'm just telling you, I'm an introvert through and through. And I've taken that far too far in my life because I've just told myself over and over, I'm just self-reliant. And self-reliant to the extreme is I don't need anyone. I'm fine. I'll figure this out on my own. Man, I'll work hard enough. I'll think hard enough. I'll outsmart this, outwork this, doesn't matter. And that can serve you well in some areas of life. But relationally, I'm just telling you. In my marriage, it's caused some significant challenges. For years and years and years on the other side of Jill, I'd be self-reliant. I don't need anybody. I'll figure it out. And Jill's like, hey, what's going on in here? I'm not going to share with that. I've got expectations for you, babe, but I'm not going to share those. You need to guess and figure them out. And if you don't figure them out, I'm going to say something, which is entirely fair to Jill. That's so unfair. But on the other side of me, just self-reliant. I'm fine. I'm good on my own. I'll meet my own needs. I don't need anybody. Guess what Jill felt for years and years and years? Loneliness. Jill felt so many questions on the other side of me as a husband. Is it me? What am I doing wrong? Am I not beautiful enough for you? Why won't you talk to me? Why won't you share with me? And it wreaked havoc. Experientially true. I have felt it. When I think about the words of Solomon, I'm like, oh, these are so true. That two are better than one because they have a good return for their labor, good return on life, good return on your character. And then Solomon continues. I love what he says next. Look at this. He says, if either of them falls down, one can help the other up. This is so important for intentional connections, these intentional relationships to help you maintain your character. Back to my marriage, with Jill and I, we've had the ups and downs in our marriage. I remember 5 years ago, Jill and I were in a space in our marriage where we were just in a pickle. And I was starting to have these thoughts, not good thoughts about our marriage and the future of our marriage. And I felt hurt and Jill felt hurt. And a good friend of mine knew this, that I was intentionally connected with. And that good friend was texting me and calling me because he knew kind of what was going on and some of the thoughts I had. But my self-reliance began to take over. I don't need anybody. I'm fine. I'll figure this out. I'll outwork it. I'll outthink it. I'm fine. So I never responded, never called back. And then all of a sudden I hear knock, knock, knock. I'm like, and he shows up at my house. And he comes in and he looks at me and he's like, Buck, how you doing? And of course, I'm fine. I'm a man. I'm fine. And he's like, no, I know different. And so we began to talk and I began to share my hurts and begin to share what's really going on. And I'll never forget it. He looked at me, grabbed me on my shoulders, looked me square in the eyes and said, Buck, I know you're hurting and I know you got a lot of thoughts, but would you trust me the next 30 days? And just trust me with the hurts. Trust me with those thoughts. Just come to me. Quit going to Jill. Just, would you come to me and would you trust me? I'm telling you, it was a lifesaver. It was a marriage saver. It was a character saver. That when you stumble, because you will, it's inevitable, we're human beings, there's somebody to help you maintain your character. And then Solomon wraps it up. Here's what he says. He says, but pity the one who falls and is no one to help them up. The word pity is more from a view. The word pity is like compassion, like you're watching it. And I think we all have had examples in our life where we've watched someone who's utterly alone. That we've watched that individual who said, hey, I don't need anybody. I'm fine. I'll just outwork it. That gave the excuse over and over and over and over for years and years and years. I don't have time. I'm busy. I don't have time. I'm busy. I don't have time. And then tragedies or hardships or life just happens and they get older and older and you see the reality that one day, someday, they're utterly alone. Solomon says, pity the man, pity the person who falls and has no one to help him up. So the question we started with, that if it's impossible that you and I will live life without stumbling blocks that are going to come our way, that can compromise or undermine our character, what is the key to sustain our character, to grow our character? It's so valuable. Well, Solomon is very clear. Solomon says the key is connection. It's connection. It's that intentional connection, those intentional relationships in your life. In fact, it not only helps your character, but it gives you the very thing you long for. Every single human being, according to all the research, regardless if you're a follower of Jesus or not, the number one quest of humanity is happiness, joy, contentment. And I've shared this before, but at the end of the day, the longest running study that leads to happiness, that gives us an idea what's going to give you happiness. Is it money? Is it success? Is it fame? Is it notoriety? What's going to give you happiness? The longest running study ever done on happiness, directed by Dr. Robert Waldinger, tells us exactly what's going to give us what we so long for. In fact, Dr. Robert Waldinger on his TED Talk, which is one of the most viewed TED Talk, says these words. Look at this. He says, people who are more socially connected to family, friends, to community are happier. They're physically healthier. And they live longer than people who are less well connected. Just telling you, it's a gift you can give yourself. If you long for happiness, which all the research says we do, then one of the greatest gifts you could give yourself is to be intentionally connected. And not only is it a step towards happiness, but it also is what grows your character. Being connected is what grows our character. And remember the definition of character. Character is the resolve to do what is right according to what God says, regardless of the cost. So this is the idea that there are people in your life that help you see things perhaps you haven't seen, that give you an epiphany, that there are people in your life that said, man, I'm reading this book, and they're like, and here's what it says in this book, this statement, this principle, and you're like, man, that is so freeing, that is so liberating, that is so helpful. Man, what's that book? And you read the book, and all of a sudden your character grows. It's those people in your life that encourage you. Maybe they're in counseling, or they went to church and they heard something, or whatever it is, and they're like, hey, here's a new insight on God, or here's this new perspective, or here's something I've never heard about the grace of God, and you're like, wow, that's so helpful. Or it's those times in life when you're stuck in your marriage, stuck in your career. You know, oftentimes we get stuck relationally because we just need new information. And that new information comes from those intentional connections. That individual to go, hey, have you ever read this? Have you ever seen this? Oh, here's this principle. And all of a sudden you're like, man, and it helps your character grow because of the intentional connection. Not only does connection grow your character, but connection maintains your character. Maintaining your character is that maintenance of your character. It's that idea, like you've heard before, iron sharpens iron. Maintaining your characters, maybe you have a New Year's resolution. Maybe you're doing that Bible app and it's like, hey, I want to read the Bible or go through the Bible every year. It's that intentional relationship who checks on you throughout the week and says, hey, how's that going with that Bible reading app? Or maybe you're trying to lose weight or get healthier and you're like, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to hit the gym. And it's that person who reflects to you throughout the week and says, hey, I'm praying for you. Or, hey, how's it going? Or, hey, do you want to meet me at the gym? Or it's my friend that I was talking to just the other day, and he was talking about the fact that he wants a new truck that he cannot afford. So he sat down with a buddy of his and he said, hey, this year, here's what I want you to do. I want you to hold me accountable because I want to go to the car dealer. I want to buy that truck. I want to put some money down that I cannot afford. Do not let me do that. And then his friend said, hey, I'll help you with that. And he said throughout this last week, his friend was sending him like reminders. Hey, make sure don't go down to the car dealer. You can't afford it. Remind. And then his friend started sending him different trucks that he could afford. See, trying to help him out there. But that's the point. It's simply maintaining your character. It's iron sharpening iron. That intentional relationship that is for you, that may share things with you you do not want to hear. But boy, you need to hear to maintain your character. And last of all, connection is absolutely the thing that helps us sustain our character. The difference between maintaining and sustaining is there are things in your life that can break your character. Difficulties, traumatic events. If you were here last week, you heard me share that over Christmas break, unfortunately, Jill's dad passed away unexpectedly. Well, guys, I'm going to tell you, my family is still grieving. But during that time, you know, I've had multiple conversations with my boys, and my boys were looking at me, asking me the human questions they should ask me. Dad, how could, God allow this with Papa? How could God, who's a loving God, allow Papa to go, Dad, can you help me with these? Asking real honest questions in their grief and in my grief. I'm telling you, as a family, as we're grieving, there are people who were texting us and reminding us. There were people who were sending us emails. There were people every day bringing us different meals and helping us with food. And guys, those are very small, but they were tangible deposits that God is there, that God loves us, and that God is for us in the midst of our grief, those intentional connections. And one of the things I do as a pastor, again, as I shared earlier, is when I meet with people who go through tragedies or traumatic events, one of the things that happens is grief. It's not linear. It is so difficult. But in the midst of grief, the emotional fog is heavy. They look up and they're like, Buck, why would God? And how could God? And man, I'm so angry with God. Totally fair. You should do that. That is being human. That is part of grief. But one of the things I'll do in those moments that people I'm intentionally connected with is I'll look at them and I'll just say, would you be willing to borrow my faith? Would you be willing to borrow my confidence and trust that God is working and that God is in the midst of this? And I know it's impossible for you to believe that, and that is completely fair. But would you borrow my faith in these moments? And I'm telling you, when those stories come full circle, and maybe 6 months, a year, a couple years later, they come back, they're like, Buck, I'm so grateful I had somebody in my life to lean on, to borrow their faith, because I had no confidence in God in that moment. It helps you sustain your character. Guys, I could give you so many examples over and over on how being intentionally connected grows, maintains, and sustains your character. But what I want to do to wrap our time up is I actually want to share with you something that our media team did about a week and a half ago. Our media team actually sat down with one of our community groups. It's a group with couples that are intentionally connected with one another, and they just filmed what was actually going on or recorded what was going on. And this group talked about their character. They talked about the intentional connection. They talked about the value of maintaining, sustaining, and growing their character. It was absolutely wonderful to see the value of intentional relationships, and I want you to take a look.
We were just getting involved with Northpoint. We were, we're going to church. We were trying to get our 3 daughters involved in different areas.
And none of this was on our radar at all. And Julie texted me and was like, we're doing this. And I was just like, no, that's just not going to work for us. Like, we've had a bad experience with that. And you were so sweet because you kept giving me like outs. Like, well, you can try it. If you don't like it, you can quit.
She's like, hey, we're going to go to community group night at the church. So we went that night and we had the biggest table, which was a little intimidating. We also won the first game, which was like, all right, this was a competitive group. I like it. And then getting to see and meet the people, it was the best decision I think she ever made for us, outside of like saying yes to me or whatever, all those things.
I was thinking back more to when the group started and just kind of where we were at. And I was really on this journey of trying to figure out where my identity came from because of so many issues in my extended family. And so truly being able to like pour your heart out and just, even some nights just crying and feeling like I just totally went there was just a part of my healing process. Knowing that people were praying for you, knowing that people were checking in, and every week being able to come and show up and just share a little bit more each day of how things were progressing and getting better. And, I think the time in which we started was so huge for so many of us.
I lost my dad a few months ago. And when we talked about this as a group just a few weeks ago, it's like the strings that God pulls to pull people together sometimes is baffling. So Melissa, lost her dad the year prior. Mark went through it, and then we have another, Allie went through it. So there's 4 of us. I think there's a recognition in somebody else going through the same thing in life is really helpful. And this group has been very, good about just being there.
People are going to be around influencing you. And so I think the question is like, do you want to intentionally pick people that you want speaking into your life, doing life with, sharing the highs, sharing the lows, sharing everything in between? Or do you want to just like wander through life and have random people intermittently speaking into that? And so, I mean, I think we didn't like choose each other, like the characters in our video game that we're playing here, but none of us would have chosen the path that we have been on in this group. None of us expected all of the amazing things that have happened in this group. And yet here we are, and none of us would give it up. You know, so I think that's what it comes down to, is like, do you want to really intentionally surround yourself with people that are going to make you better, point you to Jesus, laugh with you, cry with you, make you laugh so hard that you cry sometimes, you know? Or do you want to just go through life missing all that?
You look at the Van Dailies, and they're an impressive people. Like what they do for a living, their company, all that kind of stuff. You're like, man, these people are pretty impressive. Like, wow. But they're humans, and group shows a human side of these people that you're meeting. And there are doctors in this group, homemakers in this group, and there are entrepreneurs in this group, and there are educators in this group. Everybody comes from different parts of life, but we all have similar or relatable experiences. And so when you get back down to it, those experiences, we have people to talk through, and then talk through that with our relationship with God and how we can get closer to that. Not knowing I needed it, it has been, I would say, and I've told her this, I've told this group this, it's helped me in my career, it's helped me in my life, it's helped me create balance, and it's become a staple to what is really important to making me a better person, a better man, a better father, a husband, all that kind of stuff. It's just the people in this group.
For us, we were a little bit nervous coming in because we're so much younger. Well, not so much younger.
Okay, it's no secret.
We are younger, and so I think there is some hesitancy about that. But with the character thing, it's like we've learned so much about the next stage of life, or about the kind of parents we would want to be. I just feel like we've learned so much.
Or the kind of parents you don't want to be.
That's what I was thinking.
We do that for you. Do we want to be parents?
My biggest pushbacks to getting back into a group, but specifically, getting back into a leadership role within the group, was time. Like, certainly the first couple months, it felt like this is really hard. Like, it's really hard. But then as you develop those relationships that we talked about, it just got easier and easier, because I think you just feel the fruit of that. It's like, oh, I invested that time, and I'm appreciating these relationships and how it's affecting my relationship with God and my marriage and my parenting, and all the different things that we talk about, and to where it does become a bit of a habit and something that you look forward to. And I think the things we look forward to, we make time for. But you have to go through that period, and then kind of have to break through that period of working it in.
I think there's something too that's like contagious about the commitment and other people prioritizing it. Like, we're the only kidless couple, so it's hard for us to make excuses. But like, when we see like business owners with 3 kids that like are opening their house every single week, or Kohler as a middle school principal who like his whole staff knows, like, don't schedule me for anything on Thursdays, and the only thing they miss for is like if their own kids have events. There is like something that I think kind of impacts the group.
I think everyone's really quick to say, I don't have this figured out, but this has worked. I think there's something really unique about saying, I don't have the answer. In fact, I am really struggling. Please help. And I think the more that each couple has done that, the closer we've gotten, because there are certain times in your marriage or with kids where things are going really well. But there are also seasons that all of us face that are just really hard, or we're really tired, or we don't want to be here. But I think when you show up and you say that, and then you have somebody who can step in and say, yes, I totally get it. Last year it was really hard, but we made it. And so then you have that, you have the vulnerability, but you also have the perspective of hope, which just, I think that's what then fuels you to keep going. And we have both, which is
Yeah.
I think every time we come together, regardless of whether we've got a lesson or whatever it is, the consistent purpose of coming together as community. And it always it always kind of wraps around that. It's coming together. If someone's got stuff going on, that's what we're going to talk about. We're here to be a community. We're not here to go through a lesson plan or get through these things in time or through the questions we're supposed to. It's to be together and to be there for each other. And I think that's really, really, really special.
It's amazing to me to think about 3,000 years ago, the wisdom of Solomon, which was true then and true today, that two are better than one, for there is a good return for their labor, a good return in your life. So guys, God designed us to be connected. Being connected is where our character grows, is where we maintain and sustain character. And character is one of the greatest gifts you could give yourself. So as you think about what you just saw, what you think about what we were talking about today, I really do have one question for you. And my one question is, are you connected? Do you have those intentional relationships in your life where somebody truly knows you, the real you? And I understand perhaps with COVID and, hey, it's maybe been a year or 2 years and there's natural rhythms of that you got disconnected. I'm just telling you, today is the moment to take a step and get connected. It's time to give yourself that incredible, incredible gift. And if you're not connected because you don't have time and it's one of those things to go, Buck, you just don't understand. I'm so busy and I got so many things on my plate and so many priorities. Listen to what Casey was saying on the video. He just said, at the end of the day, you do not have time not to be connected. This is one of the greatest gifts you could give yourself. Not only to be self-aware, but to give yourself that incredible gift of joy, contentment, and character. So guys, as a church, we want to do everything we possibly can to make it as easy as possible for you to take a step and be engaged in character. Again, it's one of the greatest gifts you could give yourself. So here's what I want to do. We've got about 5 minutes left. And in these 5 minutes, I just want to give you an opportunity to take a step and get involved in intentional community, intentional relationships. So I'm going to ask you to take out your phones. If you have a cell phone or technology device, whatever you would call that, just pull that out. And on the back of your seats, there's QR codes on the screen. There's QR codes. I want you to scan those QR codes. If you're in these front rows or maybe you're watching or listening online, you can text to MP or text MP groups to 97,000 or 97000. And once you scan that QR code and once you text that, a form's going to come back. And I'm going to walk you through this form because it's a very tangible, practical way for you to take a step and be involved and get connected. So I'll give you about 20 seconds. Pull out your phone, scan the QR code, and I'll walk you through what's next. All right. You guys proficient with technology? Got it all figured out? Got the form pulled up? All right. Okay, so let me walk you through this real quick. So once you scan the QR code or text MP groups to 97000, this form's going to pop up. And the first part of the form is your name, your contact information. And again, we're not here to spam you or to market all these things. We're just here to really help you take that next step and get engaged and connected. So that's all that information is helpful for. So if you would provide that. And then you scroll down. And as you scroll down, you're going to see different kind of groups: men's groups, women's groups, couples groups, college age groups, young adults, Starting Point. Starting Point's a great group. If you're here today or you're watching or listening online, and Starting Point is a place that you've got questions about Christianity, questions about the Bible, questions about other religions, or maybe you're here and you're just thinking to yourself, why does it matter? Why does Jesus matter? What's the point? I mean, my life is just fine. Or perhaps you're thinking, I've got a lot of head knowledge. I understand who Jesus is, but I haven't experienced him yet. Whatever it may be, Starting Point is a great place to get engaged, to take a step, be involved in intentional community around those things. So that's Starting Point. And then, of course, we have our support groups, other unsure. Now, support groups, again, we've got a lot of great groups. We've got groups that are parenting groups, parenting for special needs children. We've got parenting groups if your son or daughter is part of the LGBTQ plus community, and they've got lots of questions, and as a parent, you feel stuck, and you're like, where do we go from here? We've got grief share groups if you've lost a loved one, and you're just kind of stuck in grief and don't know how to take that next step. Lots and lots of great groups, so make sure and check that box. And then if you scroll down, and perhaps you clicked other and you're going, well, Buck, none of those groups really pertain towards my season life, or here's a group I'd love to be part of, or a relational connection. Make sure, fill that out, let us know, or if you'd like to be involved in group leadership, you can let us know here as well. So guys, once you submit this, expectation-wise is we're going to follow up in the next week, and we're going to give you an opportunity to take that step, to get involved, to be intentional with relationships. It's where happiness is found. It's where your character grows. And again, it's one of the greatest gifts you could give yourself. Let me pray for us, and then we'll be out of here. Father, thanks so much for today. Thank you for your amazing grace. It truly is amazing. And thank you, Father, that you designed us to be connected. God, I know that there's so many things and obstacles that stand in our way of us taking that step, being courageous, being brave, and getting involved. But Father, whatever those are, you know, I would just ask that you do give us the courage to take this step today and to begin to enjoy being connected and all the wonderful gifts that provides. We love you. In Jesus' name, amen. Guys, thanks so much for being here. I'll see you next week.